producer on South of the Circle for 2 years during its production.
So, State of Play is our company, and we're an indie game studio based in the UK. We had a studio in London whilst making this, and we are a studio with a love of art and craft, story and message, and we've always tried to get as much of that into all our games as possible. This is our little family back when we were making it. I think this was Secret Santa, which explains the alien costume and John's lovely top there. It's great. And
Still got that.
Still wear it. Yeah. It's our little team working on it. But we also work with a lot of outsourcers, and as you'll see in this talk about it, you'll see all the skills that we brought to bear on making this game. You might know of some of our other games. These are 2 mobile games that we were successful with, Kami and Kami 2, which is a puzzle game where paper folds out. You have to solve it and turn a screen all one color. And Inks is, again, it's likewise, it's made out of paper as well, but it's a pinball game where you spread ink around the canvas, and they all start with some kind of handmade process. This culminated in this game that some of you might have heard of, which is Lumino City, where we ended up building an entire city out of paper and cardboard and miniature lights and motors, and then we filmed it and we turned that into the backdrop for the game. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about this. This is South of the Circle. This is our latest game, which is a narrative adventure set in Antarctica in the 1960s. And you play Peter, who is a scientist from Cambridge who has crash landed out there. And the setup is, it looks like you just have to escape from there. But you soon start walking into his memories, experiencing his time back in Cambridge. And we used a lot of motion capture. We used some incredible actors. And this is what we want to talk to you about today. I will show you the trailer before we start, so you get an idea of what the game's like.
Hey, come on, wake up! Wake up! Ah, that's broken. That's broken.
We can't change the past, Peter. But we can learn from it.
I thought you could handle it.
I can.
Before we fool ourselves into remembering it too kindly.
We'll make a soldier of you yet, Pete, my boy. Hello? Hello, can anyone hear me? Come in.
As you know, I have some friends in high places. I need to be absolutely sure we are on our guard.
Our only hope is for you to find a friendly out there. If you don't do this, we're both done for. You hear me? We are dead.
It's great for us to see it on a big screen, right? Oh, with the sound and everything. Oh, man. So this started off as a mobile game, so little mobile speakers, but oh, yeah. Yeah, we love that. So this was a game that was more ambitious than any game we'd made before. This was something where we wanted to address some themes that we were really interested in, themes about power, themes about masculinity, themes about memory, like what is memory and how we all create our own memories of past events. And to do this, we wanted to aim to deliver an emotional truth to this. And during this talk, we want to answer 2 questions. Why aim for emotional truth? I mean, you could make a gameplay. Well, you could make a game with it's fully gameplay. It doesn't have to have emotional truth. But so why would we go for that? Is the first question. And how did we achieve it? Is the big one. So firstly, well, our goal was to make something impactful and meaningful to people. And the best way to do this is to make sure that the issues matter to people. And then the best way to do that is to make sure that your characters feel real. And so to answer that question, like why aim for emotional truth, is because to us only then could it mean something. But the big question is that one, how? And that is the bulk of what we're going to talk about today. And these are all the different processes that we went through making this game. We have the writing, the casting, the rehearsal, performance capture, art direction, and the interactive design. And we'll take you through step by step how, thinking about the emotional truth from the beginning, you can create this kind of game through these processes. So writing, the first thing we wanted was a believable setup. We wanted to make sure that this place felt real. And we spent a lot of time researching. There was a lot of pre-production. These are photographs of Antarctica in the 1960s. Some fascinating like huts out there, some Russian ones, some British ones, American ones. And yeah, and not only did we have this, I mean, these were available on Google. We had access to these, which were first-hand ones. And this came about through a coincidence. It was the co-founder of the company is my wife, Kath, and her friend said, "Oh, you're making a game based on Antarctica. You should talk to my dad. He was out there in the 1960s. He became head of the British Antarctic Survey out there." So it was incredible that we suddenly had this resource. Like we have hours of interviews with him. These are all his photographs he took. This is him. That's exactly how you imagined him, right? He's proper explorer. But he was out there when he was like 20. So, and he's been back every year. This is him as a new recruit out there on the ice with a British base over there. And we were able to take this and build our British base to match that British base. So we even have that level of authenticity where we're designing our buildings based off the ones that were actually out there. But how does this relate to writing? Well, we have all this research. The next stage was to go, right, how do we tell this story? How do we build the themes up? How do we know what the plot's going to do? And the first thing I did was I wrote a book. And yeah, I mean, I loved writing it. It's something that I enjoy doing, but it also enabled me to try different things and like work out what the plot was going to do, develop the characters, and create an overall arc for a story with drama, and basically it allowed me to share it as well. Like I could have done this and shared it as a PDF with people, or written like an idea plot outline as a Word document. But with this, it was just really nice to have something in your hands that you could pass over to someone and say, "Read this. What do you think?" And it was a really useful part of the process for me, because I knew that I then had to understand the characters, just in order for them to say anything. You know, you can land them in the Antarctic, like, as soon as someone has to say something to someone else, you need to know what their motivation is, who they are, and that goes way back to their childhood, really. It really does. You have to know them from the ground up. And so throughout writing the book, I wrote their histories all the way back to, even their parents' histories, so that we could pull on this whenever we needed to. And actually, some of the characters' parents ended up in the game because they were going to be useful for telling the story. It also helped me develop a naturalistic style for the way they speak. And so it allowed me I was already at this stage running through how the rhythms of speech and making sure that they sounded like real people. And because you need to think of the real, true flow of conversations if you want to make these people feel real. And that rhythm, it was going to have to match how we talk in real life. And to do that, I mean, there was a lot of work after writing to edit and edit and edit. There's a lot of reasons why you want to do this. You want to do it because it's for reasons of immediacy, for drama, like you do want people to get to the point. There's a balancing act, basically. You want it natural, but you want to get rid of the pauses and things that may take away from the drama, if you know what I mean. If you watch a TV film or film drama, there are often, even if it's naturalistic, people will know what they want to say straight away. There won't be any ers and ums. And there was a pragmatic reason for doing this, especially if you're doing motion capture, which costs £10 a second or something. It's insane. So yeah, you want it nice and concise, because otherwise you'll blow your budget on the first scene. So yeah, edit it within an inch of its life, and peel back as much as you can so that everything is emotional information, even if it's just a glance to the side. Something like, make sure that everything that you're writing, even if it's something unsaid, goes towards the point of the story. I would also recommend collaborating as much as you can. So this was not done in isolation. After the script was written, we had sensitivity readings. We give it to people, say, what do you think? We would, John and I would spend hours talking about who the character is, how can we get them to enforce a theme, and we collaborate with writers as well. So we had a couple of people who were helping us do some of the interactive narrative and adding to the script that was already there. And John as well ended up writing 2 or 3 scenes of the whole game, because we all got so into it. I think we all managed to understand who these characters were. But I realize I'm making it sound like a film at the moment, and it's not a film. It's different. We are, as you'll see, using actors from film, TV, but of course we have multiple choices in games, and we realize that could be used to show inner conflict. So we're not going to be. We decided we're not going to say, right, I want my character to be angry or happy. Like you're not going to be able to change this character, like who he is throughout the whole thing. We wanted you to experience the conflict and get at a deeper emotional truth, rather than creating a sort of husk of a person that you then directed and would be unrealistic because of it. So how do you experience that in game? Well, John's going to tell you that later. Yeah, you'll have to wait for that, because the writing is just the start of it. It's the actors that bring it to life, and this is where John is going to help out.
Bonjour. Hi everyone, John here. So I'm here to talk to you about casting, because that was a process that I was running together with Luke. And obviously, we've done a lot of work in writing, and that's great. So you say you've got a good script, but obviously it's nothing without good actors. Before I get into it, the first thing that I really want to say and call into the room is that if any of you embark upon something like this, assuming you haven't already, and you're anything like us, you will probably find that there is something of a cultural difference between the structures that you have to interact with when it comes to talking to actors, agents, things like that, and your own video game culture, right? And that can contribute to a sense of unease. Maybe there's some code of conduct, some kind of behavior that you haven't perceived, or you kind of don't know what the right thing to say is. That's completely natural. You may not find that, in which case, fine, good for you. But if you do, I just want to say it's fine. It was quite scary at times, but what it did mean was that it forced us to be thinking very hard about articulating what we wanted and why we wanted to, agents, actors, and so on and so forth, which was really important to do. So what did we want? Well, we knew we wanted to work with actors who had film, television, and theatrical experience. And the reason that's the case is because there is absolutely a way that we could have made this game where we had a voice actor in a booth say all the lines, and then we had an animator animate the body, and a different animator animate the face, and then we bring all of those together, and boom, you got a character performance. But there is a different way that you say hello when you're waving hello than when you're standing at a booth. And we wanted that connection to remain as integrated as possible. We wanted those performances of the motion and the voice to be together at the same time. And that meant that we wanted our actors to have experience using all of their bodies rather than just honing all of their experience into their voice, as voice artists do. The second thing is, it took us a little while to realize, but we were interested in talking to actors who were genuinely interested in collaborating. So we didn't want people who were just saying the lines in the way that we wanted them to say. We wanted people who would question the script and say, but maybe it means this, or maybe it could be about this. And what that means is you can really tell when someone doesn't care in an audition and really is just kind of wants a paycheck, and someone who is genuinely enthused by the themes. And ultimately, to put it in game dev speak, I suppose, we found ourselves, instead of casting actors, interviewing short-term team members. And that's the important thing. So, how did we know who was right? So the first thing we did was we sent all of our potential actors game design documents. And we basically gave them homework before the script, before the audition, which was interesting because then it meant that we could talk to them about the themes and get them to really enthuse about what the story was and how we were going to tell it. And that's how you kind of know when they are interested in collaborating and getting a bit of a conversation going. Next, obviously we're actually just, we need to hear the actors read the lines. When you're talking to an actor and when you're asking them to read a line, the first thing we're looking out for was their instincts, the instincts that they had about how to read a line, what their first intuition was in terms of the direction to go with it. Because, of course, an actor will take direction, you're going to be developing that performance with them together, but if their first instinct is not at least in the ballpark of what you want, you have to coach them, you have to spend time and energy getting them out of that area into this one, and that's an uphill struggle already. The next thing is responding to direction. And the thing I want to say about this is, of course, all actors respond to direction. That's their job. And if they don't do that, they're bad actors. But do they respond to your direction? Luke has his own way of expressing himself, his own references, his own set of ideas. If that alchemy isn't there, if there is no simpatico in that sense, if you can't connect, then, of course, again, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle to get the performance that you want. And the last thing I'll say about this is that when it comes to success, when it comes to finding the right kind of actor, success is not about an actor coming in, reading it once, and then blowing your mind. That did happen from time to time on South of the Circle, and that was really great. But if that is the only criterion you have for choosing the right actor, you're going to be disappointed. Success is actually, for us, about finding the kind of actor you can build a relationship with and build a performance together with, because some of the best and most successful performances in South of the Circle were from actors who we had a relationship with and we'd had conversations with to build that and develop it. Over to you.
Yeah, so after you've been through that process and you have these wonderful actors that you get on well with, you've had a great casting session, this is almost the most important part of the process. This is where you really get to know the actors and you will take it into a whole new space. You will get to a whole new level if you rehearse, because it's not about just learning the lines. We spend a lot of time with our actors talking with them about where their characters, as I've said, with the writing, where they've come from, what their motivation is, as an actor likes to know, and to try different approaches. It gave them the time. It gave as much time as the schedule would allow for them to come in, try something one way. If it wasn't working, do it a different way. It also helped us develop a good way of working together, having that time. And what it did was it created something new and better than we would have done than we knew we could make. So we had an image in our mind, perhaps, of how it would be. If you work with an actor, they can take it to a whole new level. And this is one scene which, if you play the game, you will see and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But these are the two parents of Peter. So actually, Peter is a young boy in bed at this point, and you're just listening to them have a discussion. So when we were rehearsing this, it was going well. It was they were having a good run through. There was just something missing, and it was until the actress playing the wife said, "Okay, so I understand that I'm in this relationship now with this man. How did we get together? How did we get to this point?" And so we stopped rehearsing for a while, and we spent hours just talking with them about who their characters used to be, and it gave them both an understanding of how they got to this point, and you can see that in all the little movements that they then have there. There are little looks that she gives to him that are slightly uncertain, that were just not there in the first rehearsal. So that's what I mean about it being better than you imagined. They can come in, they can read the lines, it looks okay, you go, great, that's a wrap. That is not as good as it could be. If you give it time to rehearse, you'll get something better. And if I have any lessons for, you know, new directors in this, it would be like, don't direct to achieve the result in your head. Giving the actors their understanding of their character will make it better than that image in your head. So after we've done this, you've got to go about capturing those performances. And John is going to explain how we did that.
Hi. Okay, so performance capture. A lot of work has obviously gone into writing and then finding the best actors and then rehearsing with those actors. How do we get that work to come through into the game engine? This may well be a technical audience, in which case I won't go over the specifics of what motion capture is. What I will say is that we used a very big capture volume, and that allowed actors to kind of walk up and down, and allowed us to do all the stuff that we wanted to do. And you can see the size of that that capture volume in these screens.
Did that make the final cut?
That I think is in the bloopers. Yes. Oh God, what's happened? Right, there we go. So. We also use head-mounted cameras to capture facial animation, so that's what those bright lights are doing here. They're very uncomfortable for the actors, but ultimately got really great results. The thing about this is that it's a really big topic, and there's lots that I can talk about. I can talk about what the hell is going on in this picture. I can talk about what it's like to simulate a gunshot in a motion capture environment. I can talk about the wonderful sets that our motion capture partner used in order to try and recreate the motion of a rowing boat, for instance. There's a lot of ingenuity that goes into this kind of stuff, which we're not going to talk about. What we are going to talk about is focused specifically to the subject of this talk, which is the choices that we made to help us preserve all of the work that Luke had done in writing and then casting and then directing. And really, it's just two things. The first is that we recorded whole scenes from start to finish in single takes. So if you play South of the Circle, assuming you haven't already, you'll see that there are very few cuts of the camera. There are like whole scenes without a cut at all. Now, we've also heard that old game dev adage about a programmer being very grumpy about being disturbed in the middle of a task. And that's because context switching requires a great deal of cognitive load. So if you're in the middle of a task and you're in flow and you get switched out of it and you have to answer a question and you come back in, it takes you a while to get into the mix, right? The same actually is true of actors. So any television or film that you will see will have involved a scene being filmed from a very specific angle, and the actors come in at 8 o'clock and they do the scene, and then they break, they go and do something else for like 2 hours whilst the cameras are all picked up, moved over, the lights are changed, and they film the scene from a different angle. Then the actor has to come and do that again with the same emotional energy that they had before they had breakfast. This is difficult for the actors, right? And obviously, a skilled television and film actor will be able to do that, no problem. But we wanted to remove those obstacles altogether. So you'll see that, this, which is the three characters in the plane towards the end of the game, that is just an entire day of them in that cramped environment, running that scene from start to finish, not changing the context, really having the opportunity to get their heads in that zone. And it really comes through in the performances. The second thing we did was we recorded voice, sound, face, sound, face, and body data all at the same time. Regarding what I was saying before about like waving and saying hello at the same time, having the different energy, we made sure that we captured all of that so that all of the data came from the same take and could be stitched together in the game at the same time. And that preserved a great deal of integrity. And when that happened and it worked, it was really great.
This weather reminds me of home.
Was it this miserable all the time?
No, although Edinburgh always looked better in the rain to me, so that's why I choose to remember it.
That's where you grew up, isn't it?
So you can see that there are like shifts of weight and like tilts of the head and lilts of the voice, all of which come from the same performance. And having that integrated gives you no doubt that there's a real human being behind that performance, which is really important. However, all of this was a pain for two reasons. Well, many reasons, but two I'm going to talk about right now. Whole takes. If you're doing whole takes, anyone who's done any motion capture will know that you are buying data. You pay for every single second of data that you're buying. And usually, if you want to economize, you do shot by shot. You say, okay, well, this person, we can't see their face because it's just their feet. So we're just going to buy the body data, forget the face data for this 3-second clip, and so on and so forth. You can't do that when you're taking the data for 3 people who are on camera all at the same time in a single take. It's impossible. So we actually had to go through a lot of pain developing a custom process to allow that to happen and not break the bank. The second thing is if you are recording body, face, and audio all at the same time, there's a big technical challenge just in managing that data, making sure it all starts at the same time, and triggering it all at the same time in-game. So, yes, we recorded whole scenes in single takes. Yes, we recorded sound, face, and body all at the same time. Yes, it was a pain. If you want to try anything like this at all, in fact, if you're doing any motion capture at all, I would thoroughly, strongly, please implore you to organize a test shoot first. We didn't make ours work as hard as it could have done for us, but a test shoot is a place where you can get things wrong, where you can realize that, okay, actually I need a custom process for this, and that's the most important thing.
Me again. So, like, we have all our wonderful performances. They're in the bag. They've been recorded, but they're really just a string of ones and zeros somewhere on a computer. They don't exist as, in a game yet. So what I want to talk to you about is the art and how you get to that same emotional truth level in the art. And so this is something that I feel quite strongly about. I mean, the direction of games has been a progression from the beginning towards photorealism, and sometimes it's held up as a holy grail for video games. But to us, realism does not mean photorealism. And the mocap in particular is often done to produce the most photorealistic characters. But we knew that, as a team of just 10 people, aiming for that only risked making it feel less real. You start to spot the things that are wrong. You start to spot that the skin's too shiny. You start to spot the fact the blade of grass doesn't move properly. And all that will take you out of the experience. What we were after was the emotional truth of the scene. And we went about this by reducing things down to the essentials, which I feel is more how we actually see in real life anyway. Painters are all about trying to get to how we see and feel in real life. Hopper's a big inspiration for me. These are 2 of his paintings. You can see there's a limited color palette, but everything that you need in the scene is there. This is work by my granddad, who was an artist, and these are screen prints that he made back in the 1960s, and so they're authentically of that time. But they're also, limited color palette, reducing things down to the essentials, making sure that everything you need to understand a scene is there. And this is a scene from the game where we've aimed for the same kind of thing. We don't need every tiny little sparkly bit of snow in that. In fact, it's a distraction from what's important, which is car, mountain, distance, I know where I'm going. And this is, I feel, more how we experience the world. Anyway, this is another one. Again, it's a reduced palette. It worked really well. This is now a motion captured character with this style applied. And it works, I think, really well for these things. Like, we have flat buildings, we have our rocks that are built with a few colors. The challenge was going to be, okay, works well for that, works well with a character like this, but what about the other side? What about the face? How are we going to do that? Because we need character and expression in this. So this was an early bit of concept art. This was a couple of years before the project was finished. And I mean, I still like it, but what it wasn't going to provide us with was the real emotional depth you could get in the face. And again, I turned to painting, and I came across this painter who is called Carolyn Walker. She paints on a huge scale. I think but the real painting's probably that size, but with a big brush. And it was this character in particular that caught my eye, where her face is just made up out of a few brush strokes. And that was really interesting to me. It still has a lot of depth and a lot of feeling. You kind of feel an internal world going on inside that character. And I felt like, can we do that with our style? Can we have the equivalent of a couple of brush strokes? So this was our first attempt. You can see we're just going for some shadows around the eyes. There's not enough detail in these. So we moved on from this one. And we worked with a concept artist called Sherilyn Lima, who was great, and she introduced more detail. She did some wonderful concepts for Clara, our main character, and that's where we got to. Like we started to integrate some elements that I discovered through doing rotoscoping animation, and just using the shadows. That's all you really need. And this is in Blender. This is how the character turned out. And to us, this is our equivalent. Like to me, when we hit this image on the right-hand side, that hits the same note that one does to me.
This weather reminds me of home.
And this is
Is
it
it
in
this
motion,
miserable
as you've
all the
seen
time?
before.
No, although Edinburgh always looked better in the rain to me, so that's why I choose to remember it.
That's where you grew up, isn't it?
That's right. I had a wee cottage in the Highlands too. Our parents would take us up there once in a while.
Us? Brothers and sisters?
One brother, older.
Are you alright?
Yes, sorry.
I didn't mean to pry.
It's just, he was killed in a motorcycle accident near the cottage when he was 18.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's not your fault. It's life. Or, well, the opposite.
So we didn't need any more detail in that. We don't need all the pores on the skin. We don't need anything else. To me, that has everything in it. And I can watch that scene again and again, and I still get more out of it every time I watch it. But we have our art, and we'd settled on this, but this is about, okay, interacting with it. How are you going to interact with you have your wonderful performances, you have your characters that are mapped onto that performance, but we wanted to design conversations that you feel like you can be a part of. And going back to that rhythm of speech idea that I was talking about, like the rhythm of our interaction was going to have to match it. And this was another inspiration for us. This was, it's a favorite film. I don't know if any of you recognize it. It's Ethan Hawke and Juliet Delpy in Before Sunrise, which is basically just all talking. It's 2 hours of them talking and walking, and it's as gripping as a thriller. And it has this wonderful naturalism. And we thought, before we started any of this process, before we knew the game was going to be a good idea, we thought, right, well, let's test with that. We created a little program that allowed us to play through that early train scene, but actually interact with it. And this is it playing at normal speed.
So where are you headed?
Well, back to Paris. My classes start next week.
You're still in school? Where do you go?
Yeah, La Sorbonne, you know?
Sure. Are you coming from Budapest?
Yeah, I was visiting my grandmother.
How's she?
She's okay.
She's all right?
She's fine, yeah. How about you? Where are you going?
I'm going to Vienna.
Vienna? What's there?
I have no idea. I'm flying out of there tomorrow.
You're on holiday?
I don't really know what I'm on.
Okay.
I'm just, I'm just traveling around. I've been riding the trains for the past 2-3 weeks.
You were visiting friends or just on your own?
Okay.
Yeah, you know.
So I want to play you now another version of this. So it's basically the same thing, but what we did, we created a mechanic where you could interject into that. So it's the same thing, it's still linear, but with the extra freedom that we can interject and see what you think happens to the pacing of the scene.
So where are you headed?
Well, back to Paris. My class started
Now you're
this
still in
week.
school? Where do you go?
Yeah, La Sorbonne, you know?
Sure. Are you coming from Budapest?
Yeah, I was visiting my grandmother.
How's she?
She's okay.
She's all right?
She's fine, yeah. How about you? Where are you going?
I'm going to Vienna.
Vienna?
I
What's
have
there?
no idea. I'm flying out of there tomorrow.
So like it's subtle, but to me, he just seems like an idiot in that one. He's interrupting her. Like even with a linear script, we could get something where the character was slightly different or a slightly different version of himself. And just in this little test, that was when we knew we could make this work. But of course, we don't have a linear script. We have a script with multiple options. We have, this was early concept art for it. So how on earth are you going to do it with multiple options? Well, John, over to you, my friend.
Me again. Okay, so in case you haven't worked out what the problem is when it comes to being time sensitive with multiple options, this is how we saw it. The first issue is that when you are selecting multiple dialogue options, when you're choosing from one of these four, there is an amount of time that you need to take in order to understand what the hell is going on. So this is a very high-stakes situation. I think I got this from Fallout, one of the Fallout games. This guy's pointing a gun at you. It will take an average reader, maybe even a fast reader, a good 10 to 15 seconds to understand, to read this, then read this, then read this, understand what they're saying, and then make a choice. And that 10 to 15 seconds is one in which real life you'd be shot. So the issue is that when it comes to selecting dialogue options, when you're choosing from very specifically laid out text, there is a very high cognitive load that is involved in making a selection. The second issue is when an option is rendered in text, it's actually quite unclear how it's going to be delivered in speech. Now, the job of a good games writer is to give you clues as to how something will be said through context, of course. We all understand that. But there is still a sense in which the line, "Hey, where are you going now?" could be, "Hey, where are you going now?" Or it could be, "Hey, where are you going now?" Or it could be, "Where are you going now?" It could be all of those things, and there's no way of knowing just from the text. So we thought to ourselves, right, rather than give the player information about the exact words that they are going to say and have them be in the dark about the emotional sense in which they're said, why don't we switch it up? Why don't we skip this? Why don't we just give them the sense of the emotional energy that the line will be delivered in and forget the text? The player doesn't necessarily need to know that exactly. And so we were kind of captivated by that idea, and we went through the script and we started thinking to ourselves, okay, for every single option, what is the emotional sense in which this is delivered? And then we made a list and we were like, okay, sometimes childish wonder, sometimes it's playful, sometimes it's self-effacing, like all of those things. And we started to group them together so that we came up with a general taxonomy of emotions that a player could choose from. And we wanted that taxonomy to be broad enough so that it could cover all the bases, but short enough so that a player could remember what all of them were. Luke.
Yeah. This was where we needed some way of conveying this. Again, you could write honest, you could write the words up there, but what we really wanted was something intuitive that you really felt, because we don't think in words. To me at least, it feels like there is some sort of spark inside you. It's like a thought, an emotion, and you don't work out exactly what your sentence is going to be by the end. I haven't worked out exactly how I'm going to end this sentence now. There we go. I'm going on a thought and a feeling, and it's fast and it's intuitive. We wanted something that was fast and intuitive just like that. So it came down to this idea, like how do you design that spark of emotion we feel when we're talking? And so we looked at things like comic books, and this was an early idea of, okay, this is above the character, what could he be feeling? This is too comic book-like, we realized. And so we went through a whole process of iterating and like, how do we turn these into symbols? How do we turn these into something that you feel rather than read and go through that extra cognitive process? So up here we have, let's see if I can use this thing as well. Yes. Oh, it's beautiful. I see why you like it. We have over here forthrightness, a very early version of forthrightness. So what's this? This one was panic because it's a bit more spiky. It's a bit like an alert symbol as well. This one's warmer and cozier. That's a more caring one. We're experimenting with, okay, what happens if you make it even more spiky like this? We go through it. This was at a stage where we were like, maybe we can simplify it even more. We can make them all circles. No, you can't. It turns out it makes less sense. It sounds elegant and great, and I'm all for removing UI that doesn't need to be there. But actually, I mean, for one, you get a problem with people who are colorblind. And secondly, yeah, they all look the same to the rest of us as well. And yeah, that one didn't work. This is version 4. More resolved. This one's starting to look better. That one's quite settled. These two still too comic book-like for enthusiasm. This is what we ended up with, and we animated them as well, which added extra, extra feeling, extra intuitivity. Is there a word like that? What did this give us?
I'll tell you
John,
what it gave us.
Tell
Luke.
me.
Yeah, sure. So the thing this gave us instantly when we started playtesting it was it gave us a sense of flow in conversations. Because our players were not reading the different options, they felt much more free to either jump in right away or to make an intuitive, kind of very reflex-based choice, which was really important. The next thing it did, interestingly, was that it gave us a new storytelling tool. And the reason it did is because when you lower the cognitive load in making that kind of decision, it gives you just a little bit of room to inject some more information about what a character might be feeling. So the reason we did that, or the way we were able to do that, was via 2 variables. And for every single dialogue choice, interaction choice, we were able to customize this variable and manually tweak each of those for every single interaction of the game. And the first is the speed at which a symbol appears. And the second is how long it takes, how long you need to hold that symbol down in order to make that selection. So I'll give you an example. What does it say if a panicked option appears very quickly, and then after that appears, a warm, compassionate response appears? Is that a way, for instance, of simulating that you have an initial reaction and then, okay, you think better of it and you decide to be compassionate to someone? What does it say about a character if they have a forthright option that it takes a really long time to press and hold? Is that a way of conveying that they are trying to be domineering, but it's very difficult for them because they need to drag it out of themselves? What is the difference between a panic that happens very quickly,
Instantaneously.
Oh man.
Wait a minute. Press the.
Maybe. Yeah, again. Yeah, you reckon? Yeah. Hey, a panic that happens very quickly and a panic that creeps in very slowly. Is that the difference between an initial reaction and a shock and the slow creeping dread that something terrible will happen? Now, I'm not saying that we landed all of these, and it is absolutely very, very subtle, but it's a way of picking up in the unconscious or the subconscious just a little bit more about what the character is going through. The third thing it gave us is the path not taken. So this is very interesting because I think there is something to be said for dialogue choices saying something to the player even when the player does not select them. The very fact that you're making an option available will say something about what the character is going through. This harks back to what Luke was telling you earlier on. These slides about things being a film, things not being a film, things being different with this. Multiple choices can actually show that there is an inner conflict in the character simply by being in the mix, simply by existing. So, what's an example of this? Oh. Okay. So, as Luke said, the player is not saying, I want my character to be an angry or a happy character. what we're saying instead is that the character is feeling all of these feelings at the same time. It's just that when you select one of these options, you're deciding to act on one of those feelings that you're having. So this is a really good example. This is a scene with Peter and the professor. You can tell almost instantly what kind of feelings Peter is having. It's all panic. It's all self-loathing. He's having a really bad time. But it gives you information about the character that he is both panicked and getting a little bit of domineering in there because he's feeling a bit rebellious as well. Even if you pick the panicked option, you know that that feeling has been in there. Similarly, when Peter is in the Highlands cottage with Clara, obviously this is a hugely different emotional landscape that he's feeling. He's very, very warm. He's very enthusiastic and curious. Now, this is a situation which is interesting as well because he feels both of these things. And you know that he's feeling a little bit of this in this exchange. But you might still choose this, but you have a bit of information about him all the same. And I think, really, just to sum up that bit, this bit of South of the Circle, I don't know if we stuck the landing or not. Like, the jury's still out. Like, there are some bits where we're like, maybe this worked, and there are some times when it definitely did. But it's the bit of the game that's closest to my heart, just because it shows a different way of bringing interactivity into story-based games, which are about using interactivity to give information. It's all emotional information to the player. It doesn't necessarily matter that, you know, whether a choice changes the story or not. The key thing is that you're giving a sense of the internality, the internal life of a character. And you can think of the performance of Peter as a composite of Gwyl, our actor's performance, like all of the rehearsal we did to get that performance, as well as using interactivity to put on top of that something that enriches it and amplifies it.
So that is nearly a wrap. And I wanted to just go back to where we started and talk about, so why do this in the first place? Why, answer that question again, like, why aim for that emotional truth? Well, as we said, like, only because then it could mean something. And how did we achieve it? Well, hopefully you've seen that through all these things. I'm going to use this again because it's fun. Writing, casting, rehearsal, performance capture, art direction, interactive design. With that in mind, with the goal of emotional truth in mind right from the beginning, that's how you can create something like South of the Circle. And that's what we did with this game. I would like to play you one final trailer to end it all. I hope you've enjoyed it. And let's play this.
I have to go.
Dr. Hamilton.
Clara McKerrick.
This is a great institution, Peter. I need to prove its worth, and I need you to prove yours too.
I will. Of course I will.
No, you can't be leaving.
Promise me you're serious about this?
Over here, come back!
I know what happened. I was there. Perhaps you were miles away again. You promised.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
We have to stay until tomorrow, sorry. So I'm really ashamed for two things. The really bad joke I made, because I asked yesterday the pronunciation of your name, but I make a mistake even today, so I'm really sorry. And the second thing is that we only have time for 2 questions. That's my fault because we begin with a little bit later. So we only have time for 2 questions. Who want to ask a question? 1 question, eh? Not a, yeah. 2 questions by 2 different people.
How did you handle the choice of not making a choice?
Good question. So, what we did, they all have a timer on them. They all, as you can see, like John was talking about, one thing occurs to the character perhaps before the other one. And so, for example, sometimes a caring one might appear slowly afterwards. What we decided on was that that final thing was the one that you would settle on. It's so as if the character has had time to think about it. Panic might have appeared, and it might have disappeared because you've got over that. Meanwhile, the caring one has appeared, and it would automatically choose that one when it ran out. So that was our rule.
Short answer. Second and already last question.
Thanks. So first of all, thanks for the great talk. I know your studio from the puzzle games like Kami, Kami 2 and Inks, which I really enjoyed. But it's a far way from a puzzle game to what you did here. How did that go in your studio, and were there some hurdles you had to overcome to accomplish that?
Yeah, like this team was bigger than the one that made Kami and Kami 2. So I think when we made Kami 2, there were 4 of us. That more than doubled for this, and then had external contractors. And yeah, we needed different skills. So we did, there was a programmer, for example, who worked on Kami 2, but he was also, his name's George Batchelor. He is an independent developer himself. And he is mostly interested in narrative games. So he can do the Kami 2 kind of coding, but he moved towards this. And he basically realized it was too big. Like we needed to employ some more people, and he was very honest about it and said, look, we need to start employing more developers. So yeah, there was a process of suddenly going, right, we need more developers, more people. Yeah, so it was a scale, quite a quick scale up, wasn't it? Maybe do you want to add to this process?
Thanks. Hi. Yeah, we obviously had to scale up a great deal just because in terms of the actual volume of work that we needed to do. Also, puzzle games like Kami 2, they are systemically kind of driven. Like once you build the systems, like you're fine. All you're doing is churning out content. But here, you've got a lot of content that you need to go through, which is very specific. So yeah, I mean, it was a big challenge. And one of the things when I came onto the project was just scaling the studio up, which was a really big thing. It's interesting though that you say we were doing a lot of press for this when we first released the game, and that is a question that we would get quite a lot from interviewers, which is like, hey, you were doing a lot of puzzle games. What's up with the story game? And I think the answer that we ended up settling on was, in the puzzle games, you can see with like Luminosity and with Kami and with Inks, there is a commitment to the analog. There's a commitment to the texture and the imperfections that come from working on paper or like working in physical space. And like that as an ethos is what has been brought through to our commitment to the texture of human emotion, the texture of performance, the texture of the realism that comes from an emotionally true performance. And all of the decisions that we talk to you about today are about preserving that stuff that is in the real world and bringing it through into the digital.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Is that all? No? That's it. Oh yeah, good. Great.
I'm the bad guy. So thank you so much, both of you. Thank you for these great talks. Thank you for your British humor. It was wonderful. You show. You have to try something else, maybe. A stand up, or yeah. Thank you.